Serena's bare feet slipped against the muddy forest floor as she stumbled deeper into the darkness, her wedding dress torn and stained with earth and shame. The cold autumn rain had soaked through the delicate lace, turning what should have been her moment of triumph into a nightmare that clawed at her chest with every ragged breath. Behind her, the cruel laughter of the wedding guests still echoed in her memory, their voices sharp as broken glass when they discovered the truth she had tried so desperately to hide. The betrayal burned worse than the freezing rain. Marcus, her intended, had stood before their families and declared her unworthy, his voice carrying across the decorated hall like a death sentence. Not because she lacked beauty or grace, but because she carried no bloodline. No family name that mattered in their carefully constructed world of alliances and expectations. She was nothing more than a foundling, raised by a wandering guardian who had vanished into the mountains when she turned 18, leaving her with only a handful of possessions and dreams that now lay shattered at her feet. Her chest heaved as she pressed deeper into the ancient woods, branches catching at her ruined gown like grasping fingers. The orange blossoms she had woven into her hair that morning had wilted and fallen, leaving only the faint scent of their sweetness clinging to her dark curls. In her trembling hands, she clutched the wooden flute her guardian had given her as a child, its smooth surface worn by years of anxious fingers, and the small leather pouch containing the mysterious map he had pressed into her hands before disappearing into the mist. The forest seemed to swallow her whole, its towering trees creating a canopy so thick that even the pale moonlight struggled to penetrate. She had never ventured this deep into the wilderness, but something ancient and primal drove her forward, as if the very earth called to the pain in her soul. The scent of wet leaves and crushed grass filled her nostrils, mixing with the metallic taste of blood where she had bitten her lip to keep from screaming. Serena stumbled into a clearing where silver moonlight painted the grass in ethereal hues and finally allowed herself to collapse. Her knees hit the soft earth with a dull thud, and the sobs she had been holding back tore from her throat like wild things desperate for freedom. Everything she had built, every careful plan and hopeful dream, had crumbled in the space of a few devastating words. She was alone. Truly alone, in a world that had made it clear she would never belong. That was when she heard it. The howl that split the night was unlike anything she had ever experienced. It rose from somewhere deep in the forest, primal and haunting, carrying notes that seemed to resonate in her very bones. The sound made her skin prickle with awareness, and something deep in her chest responded with a flutter she did not understand. The rain began to ease, as if the forest itself held its breath. She looked up through tear-blurred eyes to see a massive shape emerging from the tree line. The wolf was enormous, its silver-gray coat gleaming with moisture, eyes that caught the moonlight like captured stars. But instead of the predatory stance she expected, the creature moved with careful deliberation, its head lowered in what almost looked like submission. Serena's breath caught in her throat as the wolf approached, each step measured and deliberate. She should have run, should have screamed, but something in those intelligent golden eyes held her frozen. The creature stopped just beyond arm's reach and slowly, impossibly, lowered its great head to the earth before her. The gesture was so unexpected, so contrary to every survival instinct she possessed, that she could only stare in wonder. The air around them shifted, warming despite the cool autumn night. She caught the scent of pine and wood smoke, of something wild and clean that made her pulse quicken. The wolf's eyes never left hers, and in their depths she saw not hunger or threat, but a recognition that made her soul ache with unnamed longing. Then, between one heartbeat and the next, the impossible happened. The massive form began to shift and blur, silver fur giving way to bronzed skin, powerful limbs reshaping themselves with fluid grace. Where the wolf had lain, a man now knelt in the moonlight, his dark hair still damp with rain, his golden eyes unchanged. He was beautiful in a way that seemed almost dangerous, all sharp angles and contained strength, naked and utterly unashamed in the pale light. "You came," he said, his voice rough with wonder and something deeper, more primal. "After all these years, you finally came." Serena's heart hammered against her ribs as she tried to process what she had witnessed. Magic existed in stories, in the old tales her guardian used to tell by firelight, but not in the real world. Not in moments when her life lay in ruins around her feet. Yet here was proof that everything she thought she knew was wrong. Kneeling before her in the moonlight, with eyes that seemed to see straight into her soul. "I don't understand," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the gentle patter of remaining rain. "What are you?" He rose slowly, his movements careful and controlled, as if afraid she might bolt like a startled deer. "I am Darius, Alpha of the Shadowcrest Pack. And you?" His nostrils flared slightly and something flickered in his expression. "You are the one the old stories spoke of, the one who would come with the rain." The words should have sounded like madness, but something deep in Serena's chest recognized their truth. The way her pulse had quickened at his scent, the strange sense of homecoming she felt in this wild place, the inexplicable pull that had drawn her into the forest when her world collapsed. It was as if her body had been waiting her entire life for this moment, this recognition. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but even as the words left her lips, she knew they were a lie. The leather pouch in her hands seemed to pulse with warmth, and she remembered the strange symbols her guardian had drawn on scraps of paper during her childhood. Symbols that had meant nothing to her then, but now seemed to whisper of destiny and belonging. Darius took a step closer, and she caught the full impact of his scent. It was intoxicating, like standing in a forest after rainfall, all green growing things and earth and something uniquely him. Her body responded without permission, a warmth spreading through her limbs that had nothing to do with the mild night air. "Your guardian," he said softly, his eyes never leaving her face. "He was one of our allies. He knew what you were, what you would become. The map he gave you, does it show the mountain paths?" Serena's fingers trembled as she opened the leather pouch and withdrew the folded parchment. In the moonlight, she could see that what she had always assumed were decorative flourishes around the borders were actually symbols, the same ones Darius wore tattooed along his forearms. The realization hit her like a physical blow. He knew, she breathed. All those years, he knew this would happen. "Not this, exactly," Darius said, his voice gentle despite its roughness. "But he knew you would need a place to belong when the human world showed you its true face. He prepared you for us, even if he couldn't prepare us for you." The weight of revelation settled over her like a heavy cloak. Everything she had believed about her life, her identity, her future, was shifting beneath her feet like sand. But instead of the terror she should have felt, there was something else growing in her chest, something that felt almost like hope. "I can't stay here," she said, though the words felt hollow even to her own ears. "I don't know anything about your world, your people. I'm not like you." Darius's smile was sad and knowing. "You ran into our territory without hesitation, despite never having been here before. You didn't fear me when any sensible person would have fled. Your scent..." He paused, his nostrils flaring again. "It calls to something in me that has been sleeping for years. You may not have our blood, Serena, but you have something else, something that recognizes what we are." The sound of her name on his lips sent shivers down her spine. She had never told him what she was called, yet he spoke it with the familiarity of long acquaintance. Another piece of the impossible puzzle that was her life. Before she could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps made them both turn. 3 figures emerged from the forest, moving with the fluid grace she was beginning to associate with Darius's kind. 2 women and a man, all beautiful in that sharp, dangerous way that seemed to mark his people. Their eyes reflecting light like mirrors in the darkness. The tallest of the women stepped forward. her auburn hair braided with leather cords, her posture radiating barely contained challenge. "So this is the human who has our alpha kneeling in the mud," she said, her voice carrying an edge that made Serena's skin prickle with unease. "Careful, Lyanna," Darius warned, rising to his full height. The change in him was immediate and striking, the gentle man who had spoken to her with such tenderness replaced by something infinitely more dangerous. "She is under my protection." Lyanna's laugh was sharp as winter wind. "Protection? You don't even know what she is, what she brings to our territory. The elders are already speaking of omens and ancient warnings. Some gifts come with prices we cannot afford to pay." The elderly man stepped forward, his silver hair gleaming in the moonlight, his pale eyes kind but cautious. "Peace, Beta," he said to Lyanna, then turned to study Serena with an intensity that made her want to hide behind Darius. "I am Henrik, emissary of the Circle of Ancients. We have been expecting you, though perhaps not quite like this." "Expecting me?" Serena's voice cracked with the strain of too many revelations in too short a time. "I don't understand any of this. 6 hours ago I was supposed to be married, starting a normal human life. Now I'm standing in a forest talking to people who turn into wolves and claim they've been waiting for me. None of this makes sense." The third figure, a woman with graying temples and eyes like chips of ice, moved closer. There was something about her that made Serena's pulse quicken with recognition, though she was certain they had never met. "Making sense is not always the point, child," the woman said, her voice carrying the weight of years and secrets. "I am Moira, eldest of the Circle, and I owe you a debt that has waited far too long to be paid." The words hung in the air like a challenge, and Serena felt the ground shift beneath her feet once again. Whatever revelations this night had already brought, she sensed they were only the beginning. The way Darius tensed at the old woman's words, the sharp look that passed between Lyanna and Henrik, the sudden thickness in the air that spoke of long-held secrets finally coming to light. "What debt?" she whispered, though part of her was terrified to know the answer. Moira's smile was sad and complex, filled with regret and something that might have been relief. "The debt I owe to the child I should have protected 25 years ago. The child whose guardian I chose, whose path I set in motion, whose destiny I have been trying to guide from a distance ever since." The world tilted, and Serena felt Darius's strong hand steady her as the final piece of her fractured reality crumbled away. The old woman's ice-blue eyes were familiar because she had seen them in dreams, in half-remembered fragments of earliest childhood, in the mirror of her own reflection. "You're my grandmother," she breathed, the words torn from her lips like a confession. "I am," Moira said simply, "and the time for hiding from the truth has finally come to an end." But as the implications of this revelation crashed over her like a tide, another sound echoed through the forest. A howl, then another, then a chorus of voices raised in what could only be described as a summons. The pack was calling, and from the tension that suddenly gripped her companions, Serena understood that whatever came next would determine not just her fate, but the fate of everyone standing in this moonlit clearing. The rain had stopped completely now, but the storm brewing on the horizon was just beginning. The howls grew closer, harmonizing in a symphony that made Serena's bones vibrate with primal recognition. Darius's hand found her elbow, his touch burning through the wet fabric of her ruined dress, and she realized that whatever sanctuary this moonlit clearing had offered was about to be tested by forces beyond her understanding. "We need to move," Lyanna said sharply, her head tilted as she listened to the approaching calls. "The pack elders are summoning a full gathering. They've caught her scent on the wind." "Let them come," Darius replied, his voice carrying the unmistakable authority of leadership. "Serena is under my protection, and any who challenge that will answer to me." But Moira stepped forward, her ice-blue eyes fixed on her granddaughter with an intensity that made Serena's skin prickle. "Protection is not enough anymore, Alpha. The old laws are stirring, and they care nothing for your good intentions. If she is to survive what comes next, she must understand what she truly is. What I am. Serena's voice cracked with exhaustion and fear. I'm a human woman whose life just fell apart. I don't have any special powers or mystical heritage. I can't even keep a man interested long enough to say wedding vows. The elderly woman's expression softened with something that might have been maternal regret. You have never tried to call the rain, child. Never felt the pull of growing things, never sensed the emotions of those around you like flavors on your tongue. The words hit Serena like physical blows. The countless times she had stood in gardens and felt the plants leaning toward her touch, the way animals had always sought her out, the strange dreams that felt more like memories of places she had never been. She had dismissed it all as imagination, the fantasies of a lonely girl with no real family. "The flute," Henrik said suddenly, his gaze fixed on the wooden instrument still clutched in her trembling hands. "May I see it?" Serena hesitated, then reluctantly handed over the carved wood. The moment Henrik's fingers touched the surface, his eyes widened with something approaching awe. "Sacred birch," he breathed, "cut from a tree that falls only once every 50 years, shaped by hands that knew the old ways. This is not a child's toy, but a tool of power. Your guardian understood exactly what he was preparing you for." Before Serena could ask what that meant, the forest around them erupted with movement. Shapes poured from between the trees, dozens of figures that moved with inhuman grace and predatory intent. Some were fully human in appearance, others caught between forms, their eyes reflecting the moonlight like mirrors. At their head strode a massive man whose presence seemed to dim the very stars. "Aldrich," Darius said, his voice carefully neutral, but Serena caught the tension that coiled through his frame like a spring wound too tight. The newcomer was older than Darius, his dark hair streaked with silver, his face marked by scars that spoke of battles won through brutality rather than skill. When his gaze fell on Serena, she felt stripped bare, as if he could see every secret she had ever tried to hide. "So," Aldrich said, his voice carrying the rumble of distant thunder, "this is the human who thinks she can waltz into our territory and claim our alpha with her tears and her weakness." The casual cruelty in his tone made Serena's spine stiffen with the same stubborn pride that had carried her through years of whispered doubts about her parentage. "I haven't claimed anyone," she said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "I came here seeking shelter, nothing more." Aldrich's laugh was harsh as breaking glass. "Shelter? In the heart of our hunting grounds, carrying artifacts of the old blood, reeking of power you don't even understand you possess? Either you are a fool or a spy, and I am not certain which would be worse." "Enough." Darius stepped between them, and the temperature in the clearing seemed to drop several degrees. "You forget yourself, Aldrich. I am Alpha here, and she is my guest." "Your guest?" Aldrich's eyes glittered with malicious amusement. "Or something more? Tell me, brother, does she know about the binding laws? Does she understand that what she felt when you touched her mind tonight was not human attraction, but the call of a mate bond that could destroy us all?" The words hit Serena like a physical blow. The warmth that had spread through her at Darius's touch, the way her pulse had quickened at his scent, the inexplicable sense of recognition. It had not been her choice at all, but some kind of mystical compulsion beyond her control. "You're lying," she whispered. But even as she spoke, she could feel the truth of it burning in her chest. Every romance, every relationship in her human life had felt pale and shallow compared to the intensity of what she experienced in Darius's presence, because it had not been real, but magic manipulating her emotions like a puppet master pulling strings. "Am I?" Aldrich's smile was predatory. "Tell me, little human, did you feel desire for him before you knew what he was? Did your body respond to his scent, his voice, his presence in ways you could not explain or control?" "Stop." Darius's voice carried a growl that made several of the surrounding wolves take involuntary steps backward. You know nothing of what passed between us." "I know enough," Aldrich replied smoothly. "I know that a mate bond forming without the consent of both parties is considered a violation under the old laws. I know that bringing an untested outsider into our pack during the season of trials could be seen as an act of treason. And I know that the Circle of Ancients has been divided about her presence since the moment she set foot in our territory." Serena felt the world tilting beneath her feet again. Every tender moment, every flutter of connection she had felt, tainted by the possibility that none of it had been real. She looked at Darius, searching his face for some sign of denial, some proof that what she had experienced was genuine. But his expression was carefully guarded, and that told her everything she needed to know. "It's true, isn't it?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The way I feel around you, it's not real. It's just some kind of supernatural manipulation." "It's more complicated than that," Moira interjected. But Serena was beyond listening to careful explanations. The humiliation of her abandoned wedding paled in comparison to this betrayal. At least Marcus had been honest about his rejection. "No," she said, backing away from all of them. "I won't be anyone's obligation again. I won't be the charity case who doesn't know she's being pitied." "Serena, wait!" Darius reached for her, but she jerked away from his touch as if it burned. "Don't touch me," she snapped, surprised by the venom in her own voice. "Don't you dare touch me when I don't even know if what I'm feeling is real." She turned to flee, but Lyanna stepped into her path, the auburn-haired woman's eyes sharp with calculation. "Running won't change what you are," she said, "and it won't save you from what's coming." "What's coming?" Serena demanded. Henrik cleared his throat nervously. "The Circle has called for a trial of worth. Given the unusual circumstances of your arrival and the questions surrounding your heritage, they require proof that your presence will not bring disaster to the pack. And if I fail this trial?" The silence that greeted her question was answer enough. Aldrich's smile widened, showing teeth that were slightly too sharp for human comfort. "Then you will be exiled to the dead lands beyond our borders," he said with obvious satisfaction, "where the winter winds blow cold enough to freeze human blood, and the only inhabitants are those we have already cast out for their crimes. Unless," Moira said quietly, "you choose to embrace what you truly are." Serena whirled to face her grandmother, desperation making her voice sharp. "And what exactly am I? Because everyone seems to know except me." The old woman's expression was heavy with decades of regret. "You are the daughter of my daughter, who was born with the gift of the growing things. She could call rain in drought years and make barren soil bloom with plenty. But she fell in love with a human man, and when the pack discovered her pregnancy, they demanded she choose between her heritage and her heart. What did she choose?" "She tried to choose both," Moira whispered. "She died giving birth to a child who carried gifts that could either save our people or destroy them. I sent you away to protect you, but also to protect us from the power you might one day wield." Serena felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "So, I'm what? Some kind of weapon? A threat to be managed?" "You are hope," Darius said softly, and despite her anger, something in his tone made her look at him. "Our lands have been failing for years. The seasons come late, the harvests grow smaller, the old magic fades a little more each winter. The stories speak of one who would come with the rain, whose gifts could restore the balance we have lost. And if I can't? If I'm just a broken human with a talent for attracting the wrong kind of attention?" Before anyone could answer, a new sound echoed through the forest. Not the howls of the pack, but something else entirely, a melody that seemed to rise from the earth itself, haunting and beautiful and somehow familiar. Several of the wolves whined and pressed closer to their human forms, as if seeking comfort from a sound that called to something primal in their souls. "The singing trees," Henrik breathed. "They haven't sung in over a decade." Liana's head snapped toward the sound, her expression troubled. My grandmother told stories about the trees singing before great changes, before disasters and revelations and the fall of kings, or the rise of queens, Moira said meaningfully, her gaze fixed on Serena. The melody swelled, and Serena felt something stir in her chest. Without conscious thought, she raised the wooden flute to her lips and began to play. The notes that emerged were not melodies she had learned, but something deeper, older, as if the instrument itself remembered songs from before her birth. The effect was immediate and startling. The wind stilled completely. The forest fell silent except for her music, and around the clearing, wildflowers began to bloom out of season. Tiny white blossoms pushed through the earth at her feet, filling the air with sweetness that made the wolves sigh with unexpected pleasure. When the last note faded, the silence was profound. Every eye in the clearing was fixed on her, and for the first time since she had fled into the forest, Serena felt truly seen. Not as a burden or a threat or a problem to be solved, but as something powerful in her own right. Well, Aldrich said finally, his voice carefully neutral. That changes things. Darius stepped closer, his movements careful but determined. Serena, what you felt between us, what you're feeling now, it is real. The mate bond doesn't create emotions from nothing. It recognizes what already exists and amplifies it. If there was no genuine connection, no real compatibility, the bond would never have formed at all. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust the warmth in his golden eyes and the gentleness in his voice. But the events of the day had left her raw and suspicious of every kindness. How can I know for sure, she asked. How can I tell the difference between my own feelings and magical manipulation? It was Henrik who answered, his scholarly voice cutting through the tension. There is a way, though it is not without risk. The circle maintains a pool of truth water, blessed by the ancient rituals. It shows things as they truly are, without the influence of magic or wishful thinking. If you drank from it, you would see your bond with the Alpha exactly as it exists, unfiltered by power or compulsion. And the risk? Moira's expression was grave. Truth water shows all truths, not just the ones you want to see. It reveals fears, doubts, painful memories, secret shames. Some who have drunk from it have emerged enlightened. Others have been driven mad by revelations they were not prepared to face. Serena looked around the circle of faces, each marked by their own secrets and sorrows. Darius, carrying the weight of leadership and the loneliness it brought. Liana, burning with the need to prove herself worthy of respect. Henrik, devoted to traditions he sometimes questioned. Moira, burdened by choices made decades ago. Even Aldrich, whose cruelty seemed to mask some deeper pain. They were all flawed, all struggling with their own demons, but they were also real and honest about their imperfections. It was more than anyone in her human life had ever offered her. When? She said simply. Tomorrow night, Moira replied. At the dark of the moon, when the veils between worlds are thinnest. But Serena, child, once you drink the truth water, there is no going back. You will see everything you are and everything you might become, and that knowledge will change you forever. As if summoned by her words, the wind began to rise again, carrying with it the scent of coming winter. The first snow was still weeks away, but Serena could taste it on the air, sharp and clean and full of promise. Whatever trials awaited her, whatever truths she might face, she would meet them with her eyes open. But as the pack began to disperse into the darkness, Aldrich's words echoed in her mind like a curse. The season of trials had begun, and she was no longer just an outsider seeking shelter. She was a player in a game whose rules she did not understand, with stakes higher than she had ever imagined. The hunt for truth was about to begin, and Serena had the sinking feeling that she might not survive what it revealed. The sacred grove lay hidden deep within the heart of the territory, accessible only by paths that seemed to shift and change according to the will of the ancient trees. Serena followed Moira through the maze of silver birch and towering pines, her bare feet now protected by soft leather boots the pack had provided, her ruined wedding dress replaced by simple wool clothing that smelled of pine smoke and wild herbs. 2 days had passed since the confrontation in the moonlit clearing, 2 days of careful preparation and mounting tension that seemed to press against her skin like a gathering storm. The pack had watched her with a mixture of curiosity and wariness, some offering shy smiles and others maintaining suspicious distance. Only Darius had been conspicuously absent, and Serena told herself she was grateful for the space to think without the distraction of his presence. She was lying to herself, and she knew it. "The pool has been here since the first wolves claimed these mountains," Moira said as they approached a natural amphitheater carved from living rock. Ancient symbols covered every surface, worn smooth by centuries of weather, but still pulsing with faint luminescence in the dying light. It was a place of power long before our people found it, but we have been its guardians for over 1,000 years. At the center of the grove lay a pool of water so still it seemed more like black glass than liquid. No plants grew near its edges, no insects disturbed its surface, and even the wind seemed to die to silence in its presence. The very air tasted of secrets and ancient magic, heavy with the weight of truths both beautiful and terrible. Henrik stood beside the water, his scholarly robes replaced by simple white linen that made him look more priest than emissary. In his hands, he held a silver chalice carved with the same symbols that covered the rocks, its surface reflecting the last rays of sunlight like captured starfire. "Are you certain about this?" he asked as Serena approached. "Once you drink, there will be no returning to ignorance. The truth water shows all things as they are, stripped of illusion and pretense." Serena nodded, though her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the cup. "I need to know. I can't build a life on foundations that might be lies." But before she could take the chalice, footsteps echoed through the grove. Darius emerged from the forest, his golden eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. He was not alone. Behind him came Lyanna, her usual hostility replaced by something that might have been respect, and to Serena's surprise, Aldrich himself. "I claim the right of witnessing," Darius announced, his voice carrying formal authority. "As Alpha, I demand to share whatever truth she faces." Henrik's eyebrows rose. "The ritual is not meant for multiple participants. The visions can be intense." "Then I will bear that intensity alongside her," Darius replied firmly. "If our bond is false, as some claim, then I will see it revealed. If it is true, then we will face that truth together." Aldrich stepped forward, his scarred face unreadable. "And I claim the right of challenge. If this woman is to be judged worthy of our pack, then her truth must be witnessed by one who questions her place among us." Serena looked between the three men, her heart hammering with a mixture of fear and something that might have been gratitude. Whatever she was about to face, she would not face it alone. Moira sighed deeply, her ice-blue eyes reflecting worry and resignation. "So be it. But know that shared truth can be more dangerous than solitary revelation. When souls are laid bare together, the connections between them become unpredictable." Henrik began to chant in a language older than human memory, his voice weaving harmonies that seemed to make the very stones sing in response. The pool began to glow with soft silver light, and the water itself took on an opalescent quality that hurt to look at directly. "Drink," he commanded, offering the chalice to Serena, "and let truth be your only companion." The water was shockingly cold, tasting of snow, melt and starlight, and something indefinable that made her entire body tingle with awareness. As she handed the cup to Darius, their fingers brushed, and she felt a jolt of connection that seemed to race through her veins like liquid fire. Darius drank without hesitation, his eyes never leaving hers, then passed the chalice to Aldrich. The older man's expression was grim as he swallowed the remaining water, but he met the challenge without flinching. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the world exploded into sensation. Serena found herself standing in a vast space that seemed to exist between reality and dream. The grove was still there, but overlaid with images and emotions that felt more real than physical touch. She could see herself as others saw her, feel the weight of their perceptions and judgments like physical pressure against her skin. Through Aldrich's eyes, she appeared small and fragile, a disruption to the careful order he had spent decades maintaining. But beneath his suspicion lay something else: grief for a daughter lost to human violence, fear that opening their pact to outsiders would lead to more tragedy. Through Henrik's perception, she was a walking question mark, a puzzle to be solved with careful study and patient observation. He saw the power that slept in her blood, the potential for both creation and destruction, and felt the scholar's excitement at witnessing something unprecedented. Through Moira's ancient awareness, she was both redemption and regret made flesh. Her grandmother's love for her was real and deep, but tangled with guilt over choices made in desperation and fear. And through Darius, the intensity of his perception nearly brought her to her knees. To him, she was light breaking through storm clouds, the answer to a loneliness he had carried for so long he had forgotten it was not natural. His desire for her was real, burning bright and true, but it was built on something deeper than attraction. He saw her courage, her resilience, the way she had faced every revelation and betrayal with stubborn grace. He saw her not as a gift to be claimed, but as an equal to be cherished. But the truth water was not finished with its revelations. Suddenly she was seeing through her own eyes, but from a perspective she had never imagined. Her power was there, vast and barely contained, like an ocean held back by a dam of ignorance and self-doubt. The gift her mother had died to pass on was not just the ability to encourage growth, but to command the very forces of life itself. In her hands lay the power to heal blighted lands, to call rain in drought and sunshine in endless winter. It was also the power to drain life from growing things, to call storms that could level forests, to upset the delicate balance between civilization and wildness in ways that could reshape the world. No wonder they feared her. No wonder they had hidden her away. But as she stared at the magnitude of what she carried, another truth crystallized with painful clarity. The mate bond with Darius was real, built on genuine compatibility and mutual recognition. But it was also incomplete. "You haven't claimed me," she gasped, the words torn from her lips without conscious thought. Darius's image wavered in the shared vision space, his golden eyes wide with shock. "What? The bond between us, it's only half formed. You've been holding back, haven't you? Trying to give me the choice you think I deserve?" The truth of it blazed between them like a physical thing. In his efforts to protect her autonomy, to ensure her feelings were her own, he had been restraining the very connection that could have shown her the reality of what they shared. "I wanted you to choose me freely," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Without magical compulsion or predetermined destiny. I wanted your heart, not your obligation." Through the vision, she could feel Aldrich's surprise, his grudging respect for an alpha who would sacrifice his own happiness for his mate's freedom. Even he had not expected such restraint from one as powerful as Darius. "You fool," she whispered, but there was no anger in it, only wonder. "Don't you understand? I did choose you. I chose you the moment I decided to stay and fight for a place in your world instead of running back to the human lands." The confession hung in the air between them, and suddenly the half-formed bond snapped into completion with an intensity that made them both cry out. The connection was like nothing Serena had ever imagined, deeper than physical touch, more intimate than shared breath. She could feel Darius's heartbeat as if it were her own, could taste his emotions on her tongue like honey and smoke. But the Truth Water had one more revelation to share. The vision shifted, showing her the pack as it truly was. Not the unified force they pretended to be, but a collection of individuals struggling with doubt and division. Some genuinely welcomed the possibility of change, of new blood and fresh perspectives. Others clung to old ways out of fear and habit. And still others saw opportunity in chaos, the chance to seize power if the current order collapsed. She saw the failed harvests, the young wolves leaving for human cities because they saw no future in the mountains, the slow erosion of traditions that had sustained the pack for generations. They needed what she offered, but they also needed to believe they were choosing change rather than having it forced upon them. The trial of worth, she said suddenly, understanding flooding through her. It was never about proving myself to you. It was about giving you all the chance to choose your own future. Moira's ancient voice echoed through the vision space. Very good, child. You begin to see the true shape of things. But Aldrich stepped forward, his scarred face set with grim determination. Understanding is not enough. You have power, yes, but power without wisdom is destruction waiting to happen. If you would claim a place among us, prove that you can use what you carry responsibly. The challenge hung in the air like a blade, and Serena knew this was the moment everything had been building toward. Not just her acceptance into the pack, but her acceptance of herself and all she might become. She closed her eyes and reached for the power the Truth Water had shown her, feeling it respond like a living thing eager to be free. Around them, the ancient grove began to change. Dead leaves scattered on the ground burst into new growth. Flowers bloomed on branches that had been bare moments before, and the very air grew thick with the scent of rain and rich earth. But she did not stop there. With careful precision, she reached deeper, calling not just to the surface magic, but to the fundamental forces that shaped the seasons themselves. The pool of Truth Water began to steam, then to bubble, then to overflow its banks in streams that carried healing to every corner of the grove. Where the sacred water touched, new life exploded into being. Not just plants, but the return of balance itself. She could feel the forest responding, the network of root and branch and flowing sap that connected every living thing singing with renewed vitality. And through it all, she maintained perfect control. Power flowed through her like water, through a carefully tended channel, directed by will and shaped by compassion. She was not taking from the land to fuel her magic, but giving to it, offering her own life force to heal what had been damaged by years of neglect and fear. When the magic finally settled, the grove had been transformed. Ancient trees stood taller, their leaves greener, their branches heavy with fruit that had not grown there for decades. The pool itself had tripled in size, its waters now crystal clear and singing with power that even the humans among them could feel. But more than that, she had proven something crucial. She could wield devastating power with gentleness, could command the forces of life and death with wisdom beyond her years. Aldrich stared at the transformed grove, then slowly, deliberately, dropped to one knee before her. "I acknowledge your worth," he said formally, "and I withdraw my challenge to your place among us." One by one, the others followed suit. Henrik, his scholar's mind already racing with the implications of what he had witnessed. Moira, her ancient face streaked with tears of pride and relief. And finally Darius, though he knelt not in submission but in partnership, his golden eyes blazing with love and respect in equal measure. "Rise," Serena said softly, her voice carrying new authority. "All of you, rise. I'm not here to rule over you, but to stand with you, to help heal what has been broken and build something stronger than what came before." As they stood, the bond between her and Darius pulsed with warmth and certainty. She could feel his thoughts as clearly as her own, could sense his wonder at the woman she had become, and his anticipation of the future they would build together. But it was Lyanna who spoke the words that mattered most. "Welcome home, Luna," she said, using the title reserved for an alpha's mate. "Welcome to the pack." The moon rose full and bright above the sacred grove, casting everything in silver light that seemed to promise endless possibilities. Serena stood hand in hand with Darius, surrounded by people who had chosen to accept her not because of what she could give them, but because of who she had proven herself to be. The girl who had fled into the forest in a torn wedding dress was gone forever. In her place stood a woman who knew her own worth, who had claimed her power and her place in the world with courage and compassion. The future stretched ahead of them like an unwritten song, full of challenges and joys and the deep satisfaction of lives lived in service to something greater than themselves. And in the distance, the singing trees began their ancient melody once more, welcoming the dawn of a new age with voices that had waited decades to celebrate the return of hope to the mountain lands. The season of trials was over. The season of growth had begun